So a pleasant day and evening to everyone. So we are the group 6. We will tackle about the article 35 to 45 in the revised penal code book 1. So first, let's proceed to the first article, which is article 35.
Article 35 Effects of ban to keep the peace. Ban to keep the peace, perpetual or temporary absolute disqualification, temporary absolute or temporary special disqualification, suspension from public office, the right to vote and be vote for the profession or calling. Objectives. A peace bond is court order that requires another person to keep the peace for a certain amount of time and obey any other conditions ordered. What is the purpose of ban to keep the peace? The court may order any person against who a protection order is issued to give a ban to keep the peace to present to sufficient sureties who shall undertake that such person will not commit the violence so to be prevented. Example of effects of ban to keep the peace. Peace bans may also be issued to resolve criminal charge. For example, if the person causing harm is charged with assault, the Crown Prosecutor may agree to withdraw the charges if the person enters into a peace bond. Discussion. A peace bond could shield you be deterring the other party from hurting you. With a peace bond, the court will instruct the opposite party to maintain peace and behave properly. Conclusion. Aversion but shift to bond yields of if an economic slowdown has been capable of taking heterodox monetary or financial measures to remain solvent.
So next, we proceed about in the article 36.
Second article is Article 36, Objectives. The objectives of this report is to provide information about the Article 36 of the revised penal code to give deeper meaning and explanation. Overview or introduction. The revised penal code of the Philippines, Book 1, Title 3, Penalties, Chapter 3, Duration and Effects of Penalties, Article 36. Discussion. Article 36, a pardon shall not work the restoration of the right to hold public office or the right of suffrage unless such rights be expressly restored by the terms of the pardon. Conclusion. This is Article 36 which refer to the pardon. Its effect which include that pardon shall in no case exempt the culprit from the payment of the civil indemnity imposed upon him by the sentences.
So let's proceed to the article 37.
Article 37, title Costs what are included. Costs shall include fees and indemnities in the course of the judicial proceedings, whether they be fixed or uterable amounts previously determined by law or regulations in force of amounts not subject to schedule. Objectives. Costs include cost expenses of the legislation are chargeable to the accused in case of conviction. In case of acquittal, the costs are the officio, each party bearing its own expense. No cost allowed against the Republic of the Philippines until law provides the contrary. What is the purpose of cost? The purpose of cost may be paid in the form of cash or by way of repairs of replacement, depending on the terms of the indemnity agreement. Example of cost: fees and indemnities. Most often fees Fees are the payment one makes for service, both basic knowing alone, for example, and complex like drafting a will or preparing your taxes. Discussion. Indemnity is a com- compensation for damage or loss, which is a use in the legal sense. Indemnity may also refer to an exemption from liability for damage. Indemnity is a construction agreement between two parties. In this agreement, one party agrees to pay the potential losses or damage caused by another party. Conclusion. In contract law, indemnity is a contractual obligation of one party. Indemnifier con, to compensate the loss incurred insured to the other party. Indemnity holder, due to the acts of the indemnitor or any other party. The duty of indemnify is usually but not always quiz with the contractual duty to hold harmless or save harmless. In contrast, a guarantee is one obligation of one party, assuring the other party that guarantor will perform the promise of the third party if it defaults.
So let's proceed to the Article 38.
So the next article is Article 38, Pecuniary Liabilities or Order of Payment. Then, objectives. The objective of this report is to give and share information about Article 38, Pecuniary Liabilities or Order Payment. The goal of this report is to share and explain the information according to Article 38. Overview. General provision regarding the date of enforcement and application of the provision of this code, and regarding of this offense, the person liable and the penalties. And discussion. Article 38, Order Payment. This shall be known as the Revised Penal Code in case the property of the offender should not be sufficient for the payment of all his pecuniary liabilities. The same shall be met in the following order: the preparation of damage cause, the fine, the cost of proceeding. So, Article 38 is only applicable only if the offender's money is not enough. If the offender's money is enough, the first thing to do is to pay the four property of the offender. Conclusion. This Article 38 is applicable in case the properties of the offender are not sufficient for the payment of all his. Hence, if the offender has insufficient or no property, there is no use for Article 38.
So let's proceed to the Article 39.
Objectives of Article 39. Students will learn about how Article 39 operates in the criminal justice system. Next is, this report is provide information about the Article 39 of the Revised Penal Code to give deeper meaning and explanation. Republic Act Number 5465, an act amending Article 39 of Act Number 3815, Revised Penal Code, increasing the rate per day of subsidiary penalty from 2 pesos and 50 centavos to 8 pesos.
So, subsidiary penalty, if the convict has no property with which to meet the fine mentioned in the paragraph 3 of the next preceding article, he shall be subject to a subsidiary personal liability at the rate of 1 day or each 8 pesos amount equivalent to the highest minimum wage rate prevailing in the Philippines at the time that judgment of conviction becomes final. So, subsidiary penalty, it is a penalty that takes the place of the fine for insolvent convicts. It is neither a principal nor accessory penalty, but a substitute penalty for fine only. The subsidiary penalty may be in the form of imprisonment or deprivation of right depending upon the principal penalty imposed on the convict.
So first is if the principal penalty imposed be prison, correctional, or arresto and fine, he shall remain under confinement until his fine referred in the preceding paragraph is satisfied. But his subsidiary imprisonment shall not exceed 1/3 of the term of the sentence, and in no case shall it continue for more than 1 year, and no fraction or part of a day shall be counted against the prisoner. Next is when the principal penalty imposed be only a fine, the subsidiary imprisonment shall not exceed 6 months. If the culprit shall have been prosecuted for a grave or less grave felony, and shall not exceed 15 days if for a light felony. Next is when the principal penalty imposed is higher than a prison, correctional, no subsidiary imprisonment shall be imposed upon the culprit.
Next is if the principal penalty imposed it not be executed by confinement in a penal institution, but such penalty is of fixed duration. The convict during the period of time established in the preceding rules shall continue to suffer the same deprivation as those of which the principal penalty consists. Next, the subsidiary personal liability which the convict may have suffered by reason of insolvency shall not relieve him from the fine in the case his financial circumstances should improve. As amended by RA number 5465, which lapsed into law on April 21, 1969. The conclusion: if the offender has no property to cover the fine, secondary imprisonment is imposed. This means that a criminal who owns enough property to cover the fine cannot serve a sentence of secondary imprisonment in place of the fine.
So let's proceed to the Article 40, which is death, its accessory penalties. So Article 40 is under the Section 3. So the objectives of this report is to provide information about the Article 40, which is death, its accessories penalty of the revised penal code, to give deeper meaning and explanation. So the overview or introduction of this report is the accessory penalties are understood to be always imposed upon the offender by the mere fact that the law fixes a certain penalty for the crime for Article 40. So, Article 40 is under the Section 3, which is penalties in which other accessory penalties are inherent. So, dito guys, from the Article 40 to 44, or Article 40 to Article 45, it's talk about the sa mga accessories na penalty. Na yung kakibat nito is yung kapag yung isang principal penalties ay naibigay sa isang offender. So, kapag yung principal penalty o kapag may naibigay o nagre-render ng decision sa court, meron siyang accessories or meron siyang mga accessories penalty. Nakasali na dun sa principal penalties na yon. So sa Article 40, which is death is accessory penalties, the death penalty when it's not executed by reason of commutation or pardon shall carry with it that perpetual absolute disqualification and that or civil interdiction during 30 years following the death sentence, unless such accessory penalties have been expressly remitted in the pardon. So, sa Article 40, it's talk about naman sa penalty, death penalty. That penalty has been abolished. Based on sa nabasa kong book, abolish siya, hindi siya abolish yung nabasa ko na word. By virtue of Republic Act 9346, and all cases where death penalty was imposed were automatically commuted to reclusion perpetua. So, itong death penalty na to is death penalty na punishment, guys, or principal punishment, or what we call the capital punishment is na-abolish na siya. Based dun sa nabasa kong book sa abolish yung word na ginamit. For the reason that is barbarous, cruel, and unusual punishment which belong by that era. So, it's not now implemental or it's not applicable in this enlightened age. So, ayan yung reason kung bakit siya na-abolish. So, kapag pinataw yung sentence ng isang judge or whatever yung death na penalties, directly mako-convert na siya into reclusion perpetua or yung penalty na 20 years and 1 day to 40 years. So, dito kapag pinataw na yung death, yung accessory penalties, kasama na dito is yung perpetual absolute disqualification and civil interdiction during 30 years if not expressly remitted in the pardon. So, itong dalawang to, yung dalawang accessories na yan, ayan ay nasasali din kapag ipinataw na yung death na punishment. So, that's all for the Article 40. So, let's proceed to Article 41.
Article 41. So the objective of this report is to provide information about the Article 41 of the revised penal code to give deeper meaning and explanation. The reclusion perpetua and reclusion temporal is the penalty of reclusion perpetua shall be from 20 years and 1 day to 40 years, and the reclusion temporal is the penalty shall be from 12 years and 1 day to 20 years. So the example of reclusion perpetua and reclusion temporal. So these are the example. If a child conflict with the law is a charge with murder, the prescribed penalty is reclusion perpetua to death, while the penalty to be actually imposed is reclusion temporal because of the privilege mitigating circumstance of minority discussion. If he penalties of reclusion perpetua and reclusion temporal shall carry with them that of civil interdiction for life or during the period of the sentence. So let's proceed to Article 42. Thank you.
Article 42. Objectives. The objective of the report is to provide information about the Article 42 of the revised penal code to give deeper meaning and explanation. Overview. The revised penal code of the Philippines, Book 1, Title 3, Penalties, Chapter 3, Duration and Effects of Penalties, Article 42. Discussion. The penalty of prison may or shall carry with it that of temporary absolute disqualification and that of perpetual special disqualification, but the right of suffrage which the offender shall suffer although pardon as to the principal penalty unless the same shall have been expressly remitted in the pardon. Conclusion. This is Article 42, which refers to the death. Its accessory penalties include that the offender shall suffer although pardon as to the principal penalty unless the same shall have been expressly remitted in a pardon.
So let's proceed for the Article 43.
So I'm gonna talk about the Article 43 of the Revised Penal Code, but before that, I'm gonna cite first the provision. So Article 43, Prison Correctional, it's accessory. Sorry, I'm gonna read first the objectives. The objective of this report is to provide information about the Article 43 of the Revised Penal Code to give deeper meaning and explanation. So the overview or the introduction of this report is the Revised Penal Code Book of the Revised Penal Code of the Philippines, Book 1, Title 3, Penalties, Chapter 3, Duration and Effects of Penalties, which is the Article 43. So, I'm gonna cite first the provision. Prison Correctional. Its accessory penalties. The penalty of prison correctional shall carry with it that of suspension from public office, from the right to follow a profession or calling, and that of perpetual special disqualification if the duration of that imprisonment shall exceed 18 months. And leave. And the offender shall suffer the disqualification provided in the article, although pardon as to the principal penalty, unless the same shall have been expressly remitted in the pardon. So, Article 43, it talks about the accessory penalties affiliated to principal penalty, which is prison correctional. This means that when the court renders a judgment or when the court imposes a penalty prison correctional, there are accessory penalties that are implied to be included in the penalty of an offender. Number 1, suspension from public office, from the right to follow a profession or calling. So, upon conviction of a crime, the penalty of which is prison correctional, and without availing the benefit of probation law, a person will be suspended only from his office and the right to follow or exercise a profession or calling for a duration of the principal penalty. However, if the duration of the imprisonment exceeds 18 months, he shall suffer the perpetual special disqualification to exercise the right of suffrage. So here in the prison correctional, the accessory penalty that an offender can get is the suspension from his public office, the suspension from practicing his or her calling or profession. But this suspension will only end until he has served his sentence. So prison correctional, so when he finishes serving that, his suspension will also end. So another accessory penalty affiliated to prison correctional is the perpetual special disqualification from the right of suffrage. And you might ask, what is the right of suffrage? It is the right to vote or to be voted. So we must note here that there is a perpetual special disqualification from the right of suffrage only when the duration of said imprisonment exceeds 18 months. And even if the president gives him pardon, he will continue to serve his penalty unless the president expressly gave the pardon. Then the accessory penalties involved in his case will also disappear. When that happens, that would be an exemption. So the punishment that is the accessory penalty will also disappear, which included in the penalty of prison correctional, and there are suspension from public office, from the right to follow a profession or calling, and perpetual special disqualification from the right of suffrage.
So let's proceed to the Article 44, which is arresto, its accessory penalties. So the objectives of this report is to provide information about the Article 44, arresto, its accessory penalties of the RPC, to give deeper meaning and explanation. So the overview or introduction, the accessory penalty are understood to be always imposed upon the offender by mere fact that the law fixes a certain penalty for the crime, Article 44. So, Article 44, arresto, its accessory penalties. The penalty of arresto shall carry with it that of suspension of the right to hold office and the right of suffrage during the term of the sentence. So, yung provision na to, it refers sa mga accessory penalties na may kasama kapag nagre-render ang court ng judgment sa offender ng penalty na arresto. Right to hold office, ayan, and the right of suffrage during the term of sentence. So, again, yung accessories penalties na masasama dito is yung suspension. Ayan o, suspension of the right to hold. Tapos, yung right of suffrage. So, ibig sabihin dyan, yung suspension ng isang offender para magpatuloy sa kanyang pamamalakad sa kanyang office. Tapos, yung right din nila sa yung right niya sa suffrage. Yung right suffrage refers to vote, to be voted afar. But yung accessory na yan, yung accessories penalty na yan, is yung duration niya until ma-finish na or matapos yung pag-serve mo ng sentence sa aresto. So kapag natapos ka na mag-sentence o mag-serve ng aresto, mawawalan na rin ng ng accessory penalties na kakibat nito. Arresto as the term is used in these provisions. Arresto menor and arresto mayor. So, these two is considering that the penalty of arresto consists of Act 2, deprivation of liberty. It is only logical that suspension as an accessory penalty should accompany the same suspension and the disqualification of exercise. Disqualification of exercise of the right of suffrage will be only for the term of sentence. These two is the arresto menor and the arresto mayor is term use of the provision. So let's proceed to Article 45.
Objective of this report is the same, to provide information about Article 45 of the Revised Penal Code and to give deeper meaning and explanation. Article 45, confiscation and forfeiture of the proceeds or instruments of the crime. Every penalty imposed for the commission of a felony shall carry with it the forfeiture of proceeds of the crime and the instruments or tools with which it was committed. Such proceeds and instruments or tools shall be confiscated or forfeited in favor of the government unless they be property of a third person not liable for the offense, but those articles are not subject of lawful commerce shall be destroyed. So, Article 45 talks about the confiscation tsaka forfeiture ng mga instruments or tools na ginamit sa pag-commit sa isang crime. Example, yung barrel or yung getaway car which was used in commission of a crime. When the criminal case against you is proved na guilty, the instruments or tools used in committing the crime will be confiscated or ma-forfeit siya in favor of the government. Ito lang naman ang meaning ng provision na ito, the Article 45. So, ang outline ng provision na ito is, number 1, every penalty imposed of the process of crime and the instruments or tools used to condone of the crime So when the judge renders a penalty against an offender, it carries with it the penalty of forfeiture and confiscations of instruments or tools na ginamit sa pagkumit ng crime. And take note that no forfeiture when there is no criminal case. Dapat before mag-forfeit or mag-confiscate, yung dapat merong penalty na filed pen and forfeit basta sample silang na-file or pending na case mo sa court, hindi sila pwedeng mag-confiscate or mag-forfeit ng tools or instrument because dapat may existing criminal case bago sila makapag-confiscate. That's all. I hope you learned something from our report.
So, may dagdag lang ako for Article 40 to 44. So, the accessories of the penalties in Article 40 and 44 must be suffered by the offender, although the pardon as the principal penalties. To relieve of this penalty, they must be expressed remitted in the pardon. So that's all for our presentation of Article 35 to 45. Thank you.